Goeienaand. Welkom by vanaand se program.
Ons is nou al gewoond aan wilde nuusweke, wanneer dit by die politiek in Suid-Afrika kom.
Die afgelope week was groot sports, van 'n seksvideo van 'n minister tot 'n burgemeester wat 'n hele party gijslaar hou.
Maar ons begin met die nuwe kinkels in die VBS-skandaal. Steven Tel maak hierdie ingewikkelde saak vir ons meer verstaanbaar.
Senior werknemers en amptenare het na bewering byna R2 miljard uit die koffers van VBS Mutual Bank gesteel. En 2 politieke partye word by die skandaal betrek. Die broer van die EFF se adjunkleier Floyd Shivambu, Brian Shivambu, het glo onregmatig R16,1 miljoen van VBS ontvang. Daar is ook aantekens dat Floyd Shivambu self 'n groot deel van die geld van sy broer gekry het en die EFF direk R1,3 miljoen. Die Mail and Guardian berig verder dat byna R6 miljoen van Brian Shivambu se VBS geld skynbaar aan 'n neef van die EFF-leier Julius Malema oorbetaal is. Die Sunday Times het die week bewyse onthul wat daarop dui dat die ANC 'n sogenaamde skenking van R2 miljoen van VBS ontvang het. Verder is daar bewyse dat ANC-leiers op munisipale vlak hulle munisipaliteite se geld in VBS belê het. Tesouriereëls verbied dit. Die ANC se integriteitskommissie het aanbeveel dat alle ANC-lede wat direk met die VBS-bankskandaal verbind word, nie meer in hulle poste moet aanbly nie. Is dit 'n geleentheid vir nuwe sterk anti-korrupsie optrede deur die party, of is dinge effens meer ingewikkeld? Die voorsitter van die kommissie, George Mashamba, sê die regte prosedures moet gevolg word.
It was resolved in the 54th Congress that way. Once that happens, your name is an allegation that you are involved in things which are unbecoming. Then it's your duty to go to the IC and explain yourself. And in this case, where they didn't come, and we get information that the SGO, Secretary General's office, actually advised them to come there and meet with us. They didn't come.
Volgens Mashamba doen hierdie skandaal groot skade aan die ANC.
People are really saying the ANC, if it doesn't do anything, they are not going to vote for it. And we took that to be really something that they taken seriously. I mean, we're going for election not long. And we propose that, well, since they have not come, and even when they've been told by the SGO they don't come, it means that, well, they're not keen to really come and explain.
Mashamba sê die kommissie het sy werk gedoen, maar die finale besluit lê nou by die nasionale uitvoerende komitee van die ANC.
If the ANC maybe want them to be removed, if they were deployed maybe as a councillor, as one of them is, that will be decided upon by the deployment committee and the NEC. It won't be the IC. And lastly, the point I want to make, and if there is any guilt, that's a court matter, it's not the IC.
Wat die EFF betref, het Malema en Floyd Shivambu ontken dat hulle wette oortree of onderduims opgetree het.
Ons verwelkom nou vir Rob Rose, die redakteur van die Financial Mail, en Sabelo Skiti, joernalis by die Mail and Guardian. Hello guys. Interesting shift, this of the ANC's Integrity Committee, declaring that their members who are guilty should step down. Normally we heard due process or innocent until proven guilty. Is this a shift? Is this the new trend? Rob?
Well, I would imagine that the dispensation of Cyril Ramaphosa would suggest that this is certainly sending a strong symbolic message. And then also the fact that we're just a couple of months away from an election is, they might not do this were this, say, a year ago. But I do think, certainly in the modern context where we are right now, it's a very important symbolic step to send to other officials. And certainly I think they're sending a broadside at the other parties like the EFF. So I don't think we should discount that effect.
Like Nhlanhla Nene did, but unlike Ace Magashule.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sabelo, do you think this scandal is going to hurt the EFF and the ANC in next year's election?
Well, I think, the sheer scale of it and the fact that differently, to other corruption is that this corruption directly impacts on a lot of people. Remember the people that invested monies in VBS, some of them are the poorest of the poor, in burial societies, various community schemes and, stokvels and the like. So when it hits like that, one sort of gets a feeling that there definitely will be a price to pay when it comes to the polls.
I just want to, on that point, Sabelo, Friday you reported on Julius Malema's cousin. Just tell us a bit more about that. And is there a smoking gun?
Well, I think for us, it was to sort of, our focus has really been beyond those 53 names that were Advocate Matau's report, you then need to start following the money and seeing,
goes further.
you know, who actually got a slice of this pie. And for us, it was always, you know, it came back to that classic money laundering trick where people will hide behind various individuals or behind what you would call letterbox companies that don't really do any trade or business, but are there purely to receive cash and then dole it out, you know, to the various people that are behind them. So for us, it was always about looking and seeing where the money went. I think it was fairly obvious from, you know, the start for us that we were never going to see any direct payments to some of the leadership in the EFF. So it was key to sort of see who close to them, you know, are the people that benefited. And of course, one of the things that convinced us, when you look at these companies, you know, businesses that are started that are not registered to pay any sort of tax.
Yeah.
The lack of invoicing, you know, when it comes to business transaction. Those are some of the, you know, some of the smoke that'll tell you that you need to
There's
look
a
a bit
fire.
further. It smells wrong.
Well, what does one make of the EFF's denials? Because, you know, I don't know if you had a smoking gun. I don't know if Daily Maverick had one. But when I looked at the way that they defended themselves, especially Floyd Shivambu's absolute tirade, painting Praveen Gordhan as this evil cabal leader, I then suddenly thought, why would they react like this if they're not guilty?
Yeah, it was absolutely vicious. And I do think a lot of the journalism is fairly solid behind this. Certainly the Daily Maverick's pieces that, I mean, Party van Wyk did a lot of work on it. And I do think that it's some really good journalism behind it. But the ferocity of the response does suggest that they feel the political pressure. And certainly, to go back to your first question, the ANC is distinguishing themselves by their action. Because this is happening in what is essentially an EFF stronghold. So by making themselves look particularly good by distinction, they're casting the spotlight on the EFF, and I think the EFF is looking particularly defensive and terrible. That press conference last week was astounding to watch.
It was astonishing. And Floyd Shivambu's piece was just like Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was crazy stuff.
Can we expect pushback in the NEC? We've already seen JC Duarte coming out saying allow time for people to clear their names and ready the case. And obviously there are people in the NEC that would not want this to go too far, the investigation.
Well, I mean, I think if you look at, you know, media reports around this, you can already see that it does indeed go further than those regional leaders out in Limpopo as far as the ANC is concerned. There's still, you know, the matter of the fact that VBS really became known and really attracted attention through, you know, the granting of that loan to the former President Zuma when he needed to make, you know, his payment on Gandla. And then the recent revelations, of course, that show us that he only started making payments back on that loan, you know, this year when things were looking very rocky for the bank. And you look at the role that organizations such as the Free State Development Corporation, you know, played in this entire debacle. They are one of, you know, the organizations that paid a lot of money in there. Of course, there's other, you know, smaller public entities that also made these deposits without, you know, the necessary approvals from Treasury or the shareholder departments. So it tells you that the more we dig, we will find that there probably are more people that played either the role of being a fixer or instructed that some of these monies go to VBS.
Yeah. What strikes me from reading social media and the people, ordinary people's reaction, is that the EFF is going to take more strain out of this because it's almost par for the course for the ANC. We're used to it. But here is the payback the money party. The revolutionaries, the champions of the poor in workers' overalls. Is it going to hurt them more for that reason?
I think so. And I mean, an interesting point, you know, that Rob, just to expand on what he said, is that the EFF reverted to classic, you know, ANC reaction. When you're confronted with corruption, is that you then start pointing at straw men and you start building conspiracies. You know, if you look at the Jacob Zuma administration, you know, that was the epitome of the man, was that whenever he was confronted with something, there would always be, you know, this talk of other forces that are looking, you know, to make us look bad. I don't think some of the core of the EFF supporters are going to buy it.
Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sabelo is exactly right. I think that it's going to be very difficult for them to overcome this. It's devastating for them, but especially on the ground in that particular area where they've always had a strong support base. For the ANC, it has affected lower ranked officials. For the EFF, it's right up in the top executive. So I think it's going to be particularly devastating for them. You know, I suppose it depends what happens at the polls and to whether they can cast enough doubt over the allegations to muddy the waters enough to ignore it. But at this point, you know, the bank was riddled with corruption. It's now being liquidated. Everything down to the contracts for the water bottles was corrupt. So
is there a chance of prosecution? We don't even have a permanent head of the NPA at the moment.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you could say there's a chance of any prosecution of anyone in the country, but I think in this case it was so devastatingly obvious what happened and so blatant in a way that we haven't really seen in this country in the corporate sector for years, that I think there have to be prosecutions. If you can't put the people behind the VBS fraud behind bars, then you might as well close down the NPA.
So we need to urgently build capacity in the Hawks and in the NPA right now. Otherwise, this is just going to be another episode and we'll forget about it in a few months. Yeah. And that would be terrible.
Yeah. What's next for the bank, though? You talk about it being liquidated, Rob. What about the people who've made deposits or even the municipal managers that are responsible?
Well, I mean, the Treasury has put in place a deposit scheme to ensure that deposit insurance scheme so that the small depositors, the 22,000 people, don't lose their money, which is an important step. Certainly the bank is now being liquidated. There is no other option. When you have a bank fraud such as this, you can't save the bank. People have talked about saving the bank, but there really is no option. I mean, even when you have a bank that is facing a liquidity crisis, a cash crunch, you generally can hardly save them. African Bank was an example. In a case of a rampant fraud, I think all bets are off. I mean, it's really, and like I said, even the water contracts for the little bottled water was corrupt. Advocate Matau's report was devastatingly clear about the bank is rotten to the core. He said there's virtually nobody in that bank that wasn't complicit in one way or another. So to try and save it, I think, would be a disaster. But the impact on the man on the street, the 22,000 depositors, thankfully, thanks to government's intervention, is limited.
Yeah. Rob, people are saying this is the biggest scandal since 1994. Of course it isn't. There's the Guptas and then there's Steinhoff.
Yeah,
and your magazine is coming out with a cover story tomorrow. Any sneak preview of new info?
We did it with Amma Bongani. Amma Bongani did this, and Financial Mail. We did this long investigation for a couple of months. It does talk about how the fraud and the rot at Steinhoff, a lot probably like VBS, started years before, right before the listing of Steinhoff. There were people who had secretive stakes in companies, including the CEO, Marcus Jooste, and was using it to personally enrich themselves. So they're very different entities, VBS and Steinhoff, but there certainly are similarities in what seems to have happened.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Bly ingeskakel, die program gaan net hierna voort. Ek en twee gaste gesels oor die Malusi Gigaba video-skandaal.